Cyberpunk 2077 has an insane number of consequences. Most downright terrible decisions actually have fully programmed and scripted outcomes, giving a lot of weight to our choices across a playthrough. After all, a good decision is meaningless when there was no option to make a bad one. But this opens the door for a lot of potential character deaths that I'm willing to bet you never knew about, either because you played like an absolute angel or just never found the bodies dumped in a back alley that are technically there because of you. So here's 12 characters you probably didn't know could die in Cyberpunk 2077. First up, and the very first person that we save in Night City in fact, can also later potentially die by our hands. Sometime after rescuing Sandra Dorsett, she'll get in contact to enlist our help once again, this time needing the databank back that she stole from Night Corp, and which the scavs took alongside, well, her. It's a pretty simple job. Just head into the basement of a Ripperdoc clinic, kill the scavs in the immediate area, and retrieve Sandra's databank. In fact, this incidentally coincides with the gig last login, which I'd recommend completing at the same time. Come to the end of that gig, we'll also face the option to kill the Ripperdoc Charles Bucks for enabling and supplementing the disgusting business practices of the scavs. But given he'll offer us discounted cyberware and can therefore be cheaper than any other Ripper, there is a strong monetary incentive to keep him alive. Though monetary incentive is the exact same thing that can result in Sandra's death. So back to her, and should we crack the Night Corp databank, we'll unlock the secret data on Project Carpe Noctem, an attempt by Night Corp to influence the minds of their employees in presumably an attempt to propagate a more productive workforce. Just one small piece of the far wider, grand, unified Mr. Blue Eyes conspiracy, which you can learn about in full in my video of the same name. But taking this to Sandra, now with the knowledge of what's actually on it, she'll be a little suspicious.
You wouldn't happen to have seen what's inside, would you?
We can then admit to taking a peek, after which there's a couple options. Now, firstly, this can be a really good idea if we're then supportive of what Sandra's doing, and congratulating her for sticking it to Night Corp will actually earn us a little extra cash, purely for being supportive of her efforts. But should we attempt to extort said extra pay with blackmail, things won't go quite as well. This can actually only be done with a high enough cool attribute, but since blackmail apparently isn't cool, Sandra's having none of it.
How much is my silence worth to you?
Here, this much.
We'll then be forced to kill one of the best netrunners in Night City on account of the fact that she won't be bought by anybody, neither Corpos nor us. It's a real shame to let this happen. Sandra Dorsett seems to be one of the people closest to cracking one of Night City's biggest mysteries, and it also takes her off the table to reappear in Phantom Liberty, being one of the 4 netrunners who we can recruit to help take down Maxtac, who then proves her skills to be second only to Nyx, another former Corpo netrunner now working at the Afterlife. So whilst Sandra Dorsett can die, I don't think that's by any means a good thing. And the same will be said for many, but not all on this list. River's nephew Randy is a key character for the main River quest, The Hunt, where, after being kidnapped by a deranged serial killer named Peter Pan, we follow Randy's footsteps and eventually find him at the Edgewood Farm lair. Now, usually, if you analyze brain dances like a normal person and scan all the clues before quitting out of the editor, it'll become undeniably clear that Edgewood Farm is the only place Randy could possibly be. But here's what happens for those who are a little less thorough. If in the final brain dance you only scan the sound bites and the Night City skyline, you'll be able to quit out before arriving at a definitive conclusion. With the limited amount of deductions we've made, River will then only be able to narrow it down to 2 farms. Edgewood, the correct one, or Poppy, just over the road from where we go diving with Judy. If we suggest splitting up, River will say no, despite the fact that the NCPD have no extra units available at that minute, and he'll then casually walk to his car before driving to Poppy Farm painfully slowly. Like, I know he's a cop and the law is like a big thing for them, but seriously, bro? You can't just put your foot down ever so slightly? Your nephew is probably dying here, and like, I do have a caliber that we could have taken. But anyway, getting to Poppy Farm and me then killing all the wraiths in approximately 5 seconds with my awesome Sandy build because time is of the essence, it's clear we've made the wrong choice. So back into the car to now speedily drive around to Edgewood. And when I say speedily, I mean River going at approximately 20 miles an hour, which is also the speed we're only allowed to go in London, which sucks.
Damn it! We're wasting time!
Yes, and that's like 90% your fault. So finally reaching Edgewood Farm, despite V's best efforts to again rush in as quickly as possible, Randy's fate is now sealed, and we are too late. Partly our fault, yes, but River drove comedically slow throughout this whole thing. I mean, come on.
Hold on, Randy. Please hold on.
After which, he has the audacity to turn around and blame us for this failure.
Knew from the start I should have hired a professional. Not you.
Then, not being funny, but why exactly didn't you? We naturally won't be invited to the family barbecue in this far darker timeline, but that's not even the best part about all of this. That comes in the form of a credits voicemail.
Hey, V. Listen now. Stupid question, but do you think you could bail me out? Last night I was sitting at the bar just minding my own business when some guy starts mouthing off about the kids on the farm, saying that they must have enjoyed being hooked up like cows, that they had it coming. Of course, I told him to shut his fucking mouth or else. Surprise, surprise, he didn't listen. So we took it outside and you know what happens next. They're holding me at the precinct in Little China. You know where. Holler if you can help your old River out one last time. Thanks.
Well, how the turntables. You know, I think he'd be better off hiring a professional to deal with this. After all, we cocked everything up the last time. Look, I shouldn't be so mean. What happened to River and his family in this timeline is awful, and our lack of attention to detail is partly to blame. I mean, entirely to blame, technically, because it would have turned out fine if we just, scanned all the clues. But come on, I mean, the guy should have at least delegated driving to us. Or better still, just split up to begin with. Still, very cool to see just how differently this story can play out, and that it can indeed have a far more tragic ending. For the quest Run This Town, V is tasked by Mr. Hands to determine the succession of Dogtown. This involves using a new behavioral imprint to take on the form of a Cuban cartel assassin named Aguilar, a name striking so much fear into, well, pretty much everyone, that we can even influence the key politics of a major arms-dealing micronation. Just goes to show who's really pulling the strings in this world. For the first part of this quest then, we need to go and stop Iago, a potential candidate for leadership who Mr. Hands doesn't want, from striking up a deal with the Voodoo Boys. After sending the boys away, one way or another, Iago soon rocks up with his bodyguard, Charles Graham, another key player in the Dogtown hierarchy who can be spotted in the Barguest lineup throughout Phantom Liberty. Just another goon, looks like, and one who'll swiftly depart with Iago if we stick to civilized conversation, i.e. point out the fact that we dealt with the Voodoos and could easily deal with Iago as well. He'll then tell us about Bennett's meetings with Arasaka and leave in peace. But if at any point we issue straight up threats to Iago, he'll order his main man Charles to step in, at which point the only way out is a brutal bullet to the brain. This of course terrifies Iago, and he immediately falls in line. However, if we read the database entry on Charles Graham, we'll learn that he was a whole lot more than a simple Barguest goon. Though a man of few words, Charles was raised on the streets of Vienna, where he developed passions for both chess and German opera, dreaming throughout his childhood of a career on the stage. But the world is cruel and destiny unfair. One day, his family faced sudden bankruptcy, and Charles was forced into a life of crime, leading him eventually to Dogtown and into the ranks of Barguest. Today, he is one of Iago's most trusted and capable soldiers, and served as a key aide to Iago climbing so high in his career. Yeah, now I feel a little more guilty, bringing this man of culture to a swift and unexpected end. Just goes to show that behind every, or at least many goons probably, there is a life, a history, and a lot that doesn't show on the surface. The Aldecaldos are a huge nomad clan, and Jake Scooter is a guy that I'll bet many of you never even met. That's because he's lying unconscious on a camp bed waiting for us to save him in a very late game nomad side quest. Jake has sickle cell anemia, and in order to survive is in desperate need of a special kidney transplant. Kinda hard to come by when you live in the middle of nowhere. So we simply head into the city to a hospital in Little China, where a contact of Dakota's is standing ready to hand over the implant we need. Unfortunately, no sooner than he's done so, we're attacked by an entire NCPD squad. Luckily, we're a ridiculously powerful cyber psycho packing a deadly arsenal, so this isn't really a problem. The contact will then confess that their original call was tapped, and that the NCPD are really cracking down on the Raf and Shiv presence in the city. Bro, the Aldecaldos have done a hell of a lot more to weaken Raf and Shiv than the NCPD ever have. Talk about gratitude. But since we're not like the Night City Police Department, I imagine most of us will let this vaguely innocent bystander guy off. After which, grateful for sparing his life, he'll explain that the police also put a virus on the kidney and how to remove it. Clearly, leaving the guy alive was in our best interests, and Jake will steadily recover after this. Hell, we can even meet him properly during the Aldecaldo ending path, and he'll grace us with a unique campfire song. But I'm betting I don't have to tell you what happens if we kill the contact. With nobody to warn us about the kidney's virus, Jake sadly doesn't survive the surgery. We return to camp 8 hours later, where Bob will share the bad news. We can see Jake's mother, Emily Scooter, grieving over a now empty bedside, and the worst part is that nobody even knows why the implant didn't take. They don't know that this was entirely the doing of the mistakenly vengeful NCPD, and they'll still be grateful for our help, in spite of the fact that we could have saved Jake if we just kept the contact alive and showed a little mercy. So in this case, in Night City, petty vengeance has dire consequences, though this isn't always the case. So, after unlocking the quest objective that's gonna burn into the right-hand side of any OLED screen, meet Hanako at Embers, we can do a couple more quests to unlock 2 additional ending parts. You know, the one with Rogue and then Don't Fear the Reaper, with the main quest behind this, Chippin' In, being one of the best in the game. Mainly thanks to Johnny's crazy night out, where he eventually winds up at the Empathy Club, in search of a dancer and girlfriend of Grayson's, Ruby Collins, stealing her affections immediately. On the drive home, Ruby will crash the car because she's distracted, but luckily the two of us are both fine, at least for now. In her disoriented state, Ruby will tell us how to find her boyfriend Grayson with one simple word: Ebonike. This will lead into the second part of the quest with Rogue, where we go to Adam Smash's ship, Ebonike, in the Northside docks, coming eventually face to face with Grayson. After a little bit of back and forth, we'll then be left with a choice of whether to kill him or not, with Grayson attempting to plead for his life with the promise of a special Silverhand possession. And yeah, the Porsche 911 is an awesome car, but there is a hidden consequence to leaving Grayson alive. After all, guys gonna want to know just how we found out about the Ebonike, and I'd imagine his circle of trusted contacts is kinda small, so he's soon gonna figure out that it was Ruby. After which, I'd further imagine Grayson's wrath is terrible, his retribution swift, and heading to the columbarium a little later, we can find the plaque of Ruby under her real name, Ruby Barrett, with the quote inscribed, "She lived life to the fullest."
Ruby. Wait. That Ruby?
Yeah, so sometimes petty vengeance harms the innocent, and other times it saves them. In this case, killing Grayson is the lesser evil, which really doesn't feel evil at all, to be honest. Besides which, we can just grab Johnny's Porsche anyway. We don't actually need to spare Grayson in order to get it. Cyberpunk has a hefty amount of gigs, and I should know, because I have an entire series of videos breaking down the hidden secrets, connections, and wider references between all of them. In fact, I've actually replayed a whole bunch of them again lately, and found they've added additional references tying many of these characters to ones in Phantom Liberty. So I think I'll have to also look at those in another video at some point. But one of the overall best gigs, in my opinion, is Olive Branch. The guy who hired us, Sergei, does this massive John Wick Keanu reference about killing the dog of a guy who's nothing breathtaking, and to settle up beef with the Tiger Claws, he wants us to deliver some special cargo. A car that turns out to have a man trapped in the boots. This is a Biotechnica corpo named Alex Pushkin. Now, there is a very good reason that Alex deserves to be Tiger Claw dinner, as he was actually part of a project to experiment on and kill hundreds of nomads, alongside Joanne Coke, who gets her due in another gig. But unless you're a nomad and took down Coke first, there's no real way of really knowing all of this, so fair enough if you decide to let Alex out and just run away. Wakako will simply acknowledge that Sergei got outbid for the gig, and that'll be that. Well, except for the fact that this doesn't work out so good for Sergei. Following this, we can in fact find his body in a hut behind the Dicky Twister Club, with a kind of funny transcript relaying what happened between him and the Tigers afterwards. Sergei pleading and promising that he did indeed put Alex in the boot of the car, and the Tigers not really caring. And so, finally, this scav's luck ran out, thanks to the mercy that we showed to another man earlier. Alternatively, if Alex is instead delivered to the Tiger Claws as planned, we can actually later find his body at the end of a storm drain in Charter Hill. So one of these two will definitely die. Should it be the dog killer or the mass murderer of humans? Comment below. Meredith Stout is the additional romance that also isn't really anything but could have been, maybe was at some points, but ultimately only amounts to a very short fling whom we never see again. At least that's the case if we do take her side during the pickup, making enemies of Maelstrom and ensuring that Stout's plan is a success. But what if we do choose to side with Maelstrom? Crack open Meredith's credship and remove the virus inside, then tell Maelstrom about it, or just pay for the flathead in full with our own cash? Well, in either of those cases, it won't be Meredith we meet outside of All Foods, but rather her former prisoner Anthony Gilchrist, who, thanks entirely to our choices, has managed to regain his footing in the Militech hierarchy. See, when the spiked credship didn't activate in All Foods, Meredith panicked and ordered the assault on the building, thus resulting in a huge and unnecessary death toll as we shot our way out. The blame was then placed at Meredith's feet. Gilchrist used the opportunity to take advantage, and rather than having to deal with all the fallout of the situation, Militech simply and unceremoniously got rid of their scapegoat, Meredith.
She placed some bad bets, her clock ran out, simple as that. Suffice to say, you won't be seeing her again.
Yeah, this would be true if we were playing like a normal human being, but we're not. So come up to the Northside docks, around the Ebenike and up the road, before jumping left into the water as the road veers around to the right. Now, all you've got to do is scan the ocean floor and you should pretty easily find her, feet trapped in a block of cement and her larynx crushed, as she was tossed in here about 3 days ago. Somehow remarkably upright, likely thanks to some cyber exoskeleton, and her head shaved as well. A sad and unceremonious end, especially when we know what was in store in the other timeline.
Militech don't forgive. Militech don't forget.
Acquaintance of yours?
Yep. Familiar face from my past life.
Weird how Johnny has memories of Jackie, Dex, and several other Act 1 characters, but doesn't recall our meeting with Meredith. Anyway, our poor, could-have-been romance can indeed also die, and that's where to find her body. A little 2-for-1 deal next, tucked away in one of the most back-end gated quests of the entire game. By which, I mean you have to complete the main questline paths, then the Johnny and Rogue quests, then all, I think, 7 of the Kerry quests. Make sure he becomes friends with us cracks, and eventually we'll unlock a little side quest to help out Blue Moon. Every breath you take has us track down and pinpoint an overly obsessed stalker who recently tried to send a bomb to Blue Moon in the mail. Again, completing the quest successfully is pretty easy for anyone paying an ounce of attention. The real culprit is actually a woman wearing a bunny rucksack who'll actually snap a picture with Blue Moon before very obviously heading into a gun store, looking for explosive rounds. After that, we can confront her, she'll panic and run, and we'll find on her corpse a stalkerish diary of Blue Moon's movements, not to mention a pic of her with her eyes cut out. I think it's a pretty definitive conclusion. Even still, if you run off in the wrong wrong direction, say, and miss all of this, Blue Moon Stalker will eventually confront her on a bridge. And here, if we don't act like really quickly, Blue Moon can actually die. But that's not all. If we still haven't shot the Stalker at this point, then that'll be done too little too late by Red Menace, who is actually also watching from above. She'll come down to mourn her dead friend and berate us for our failure, and if we're not then nice to her about it, well, let's just see what happens.
I don't like your tone. Better watch it.
Oh, I'll watch. You choke on your own blood!
If you ever noticed and wondered just why Red Menace has combat implants when you scan her, then that's why. So yeah, 2/3 of us cracks can in fact die, and honestly, it's a crying shame. Though, interestingly, despite the huge numbers of posters and radio announcements about the group that we hear all the time, we never actually seem to hear any media coverage of this. Plus, Kerry, if we phone him afterwards, will actually talk as though they're still alive. And once upon a time, this did actually lead me to theorize that they were replaced with copies by the label. But you can learn more about that in my video titled The Disturbing Truth About Music Artists in Cyberpunk 2077. Maiko Maeda, Judy's ambitious and ruthless ex, is yet another character that can potentially meet an untimely demise at the end of the quest Pisces. When Maiko makes her power play to become the ruler of clouds, effectively rendering Judy's entire revolution as nothing but a chance for her to step up, we can shut that shit right down. Honestly though, a large part of me does see Maiko's plan as the better outcome, less idealistic and romantic as Judy's, but definitely safer and more realistic in the long run. But since I imagine that the majority of you are just here to try and impress Judy, then let's take down the Tiger Claw bosses as planned. Maiko will understandably be pissed off that we didn't see a little more reason / help her to ascend to greater power, and then we have a further option.
Either you walk away and never come back to Clouds, or I end you here and now.
I see you got everything planned out, but you forgot just one thing. I've also got a doll chip.
Maiko will then keel over in a pool of her own blood, incapacitated but not dead. But what better way to ensure we get the girl we like than by permanently eliminating prior competition, you sadistic cyber psycho.
Oh my fucking god. You killed her. Thought she was untouchable all her life. Well, not my fault she was wrong. I gotta process all this in peace. Alone. Be seeing you, V.
Pure savagery from V there, but remarkably, this won't stop Pyramid Song from taking place later, nor will it prevent us from romancing Judy. And thus, in a twist-hit poetic way, Judy's new girlfriend literally did away with the last one. Though, whilst Maiko is definitely one of the more morally grey characters of the game, I don't really think this is the fate that she deserves. Paco Torres is probably one of the only members of Barguest that isn't by default an enemy of V's. He's also an utterly gonk-brained opportunist with a seemingly limitless tolerance for risk. When we meet him, he's just stolen some generators from under the noses of his Barguest superiors and recounts the tale to us in a very unique way using the drug deep dive. After reliving Paco's memories as he tells them, we'll then have a few options for him to avoid incurring the wrath of Barguest. Now, most people, I would imagine, got into Phantom Liberty later on in their playthrough and thus probably had the options to ask Panam or River for help. In fact, if you're looking for a new way to play, then try completing Phantom Liberty as early as possible in your next playthrough, doing only the bare essentials to get there. There are a ton of additional dialogues that open up when you go back to the rest of the game, even if you miss out on a few Phantom Liberty specific opportunities, like the best endings to this quest. You see, the only other two options, if we don't have any friends from the main game yet, are to either smuggle Paco out of Dogtown, in which case he'll later join up with the Scavs in another stupid play, or the final option is we can suggest to Paco that he frame Yuri Bijkov, another member of Barguest who's already in Hansen's bad books. And it's a plan which may have worked had Paco actually had some patience instead of resorting to trying to resolve the whole thing himself. But unfortunately, Yuri figures out too quickly that Paco clapped the generators, and Hansen Hansen orders Paco to be made into a public display, a warning to anybody else who even so much as thinks about crossing Barghest. And by the description of his corpse, Paco gets his head bashed in Negan style and thereafter suspended from the rafters. We can then choose to deliver the bad news to his friend Babs, or just let her live on in oblivious hope. I mean, look, Paco might be an idiot through and through, and there's nothing to say a stupid death isn't still around the corner in any of the outcomes where we save him, but his death here is tragic, unnecessary, and easily avoidable. Speaking of easily avoidable deaths, Crispin Weyland becomes a starring character for Rogue's ending path, and without being a deliberately awful person in that ending, you probably didn't even know that his death was on the table as an option. But indeed, right as we crash into Arasaka Tower, with Rogue and Johnny bailing at the perfect moments, item 1 on the agenda after we land is to go after Weyland. Restore our assault team of 2 to a team of 3, because as everyone knows, one does not simply walk into Arasaka Tower and take it on entirely by themselves. I mean, that is, unless you happen to go and make a drink right at the moment you have to choose an ending. And come back to Johnny making a crazy suggestion. But anyway, for this one, having Weyland on side throughout the entire assault makes for very useful support, especially in the final fight against Adam Smasher. Definitely the most left of field character to have in that room with us out of all the possibles. I mean, we've barely had any time to establish a friendship with the guy, so I think the fact he still leaves a lasting impression despite all of that is actually testament to Weyland's character. Except, here's the thing, we actually have no obligation at all to rescue him from the crashed AV to begin with. In fact, if we simply stay away from that area, grab an elevator access key and start descending, Weyland will be left to a tragic fate, with Rogue unable to rescue him in time by herself.
You piece of shit! Weyland's dead!
Yep, Johnny chose to cut the team down from 3 to 2 for the sake of saving a completely unnecessary minute. Perhaps a thematically foreshadowing roleplay decision if you're then planning to steal V's body at the end, but otherwise, come on man. Saving the best for last here, in some sense, Phantom Liberty gives you the option to kill off one of the most important characters in Cyberpunk lore. From the moment we meet Somi, or at any rate connect with her outside of Dogtown's main gates, the clock starts ticking on the Space Force 1 crash. If you don't head inside Dogtown immediately, but rather go back out into Night City at this point, then soon enough, Somi will start yelling at you for screwing up her big, beautiful master plan.
Congrats, B. Just killed Rosalind Myers and fuck the NUSA. Pray we don't meet again, and I mean ever.
We'll then be teleported back outside Dogtown's main gate, just in time to bear witness to Space Force 1 crashing right into it. Without us as Rosalind's solo extraction unit, she is presumably pinned down by Barghest forces and killed. Now, I would argue that surely Hansen would want to take her alive, but also going by Barghest's level of aggression when we do actually get to her, then maybe they did just take her down there and then. I mean, in fairness, Kurt is seen to be incredibly ruthless later on. And the same thing can also happen, albeit slightly differently, after we enter Dogtown and see Space Force 1 crash, if we then stray too far from the set path. For instance, if you're hoping to find Somi as she climbs out of her escape pod, you'll sadly be bitterly disappointed. Firstly, because she'll be gone by the time we get there, having apparently fled in the first minute, and second, because the moment we reach said pod, we'll get the same line about how we just killed Rosalind Myers and fucked the NUSA.
Get a grip. Tried my best to help. Trying doesn't cut it, B.
You sure she's dead? I mean, really sure.
I'm sure.
Is she definitely sure though? Because if you actually play the devil ending after this, who should still crop up on TV but Rosalind Myers? Well, a Rosalind Myers who looks and sounds completely different from the one we technically never got to meet in this timeline. So maybe they officially replaced her with a double, changed the haircut and nobody noticed, or maybe this is a tiny little oversight by CDPR. After all, this clip has existed in the game since its release, when Phantom Liberty was likely still in its its conceptual stages. So I think it's fair to say that by all stretches of canonicity, Myers can die in this incredibly left-of-field timeline. Should you do this? Absolutely not. You'll miss out on like 90% of the expansion, but it's cool that the option is still there. But let me know in the comments any more lesser-known character deaths that you've discovered, and any in the game that genuinely shocked you. Huge thank you, as always, to the patrons for going the extra mile to support the channel, and with 2.3 around the corner, subscribe for plenty more Cyberpunk content from me. If you're new here, then have a look around the channel as well. There's plenty more videos which I hope you'll find useful. Thank you for watching, I'm Bram, and have a Nova day. Chooms.